"You're just a tray carrier," he sneered, tossing $100 bill at her face like she was trash. "If you're so smart, fix my company. Do that, and I'll give you $100 million. Arthur Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Dynamics, thought it was the joke of the century. He thought Elena was just a waitress. He had no idea he was speaking to the ghost of Wall Street, a woman who had vanished 3 years ago with secrets that could burn his empire to the ground. He made the bet to humiliate her. But 24 hours later, he wasn't laughing. He was begging. The crash of crystal against marble silenced the entire room. Inside Le Méridien, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, the air suddenly felt thin. The clientele, senators, oil tycoons, and tech moguls all froze, their silverware hovering halfway to their mouths. At the center table, Arthur Sterling stood up. He was a man who looked like he was carved out of anxiety and expensive scotch. As the CEO of Sterling Dynamics, a company currently bleeding $40 million a week, Arthur was on the edge of a precipice. And tonight, he had decided to push someone else off first. "I asked for sparkling, you incompetent idiot, not still," Arthur roared, his face flushing a deep, ugly crimson. Elena Vance, the waitress standing before him, didn't flinch. She kept her eyes lowered, clutching the silver pitcher. She was 27, though the dark circles under her eyes made her look older. Her uniform was clean but frayed at the cuffs. To Arthur, she was furniture. To everyone else, she was invisible. "I apologize, Mr. Sterling," Elena said, her voice steady, lacking the tremble most people expected. "The label says San Pellegrino. It is sparkling. The carbonation might be low due to the vintage, but—" "Don't you dare lecture me on water!" Arthur snapped. He grabbed the linen napkin and threw it onto the floor. "This is why you're here, wiping tables, because you don't have the brain capacity to handle anything more complex than soup or salad." His dinner guest, a nervous CFO named Marcus Thorne, tugged at Arthur's sleeve. "Arthur, sit down. People are staring. The stock dropped another 8% today. We need to focus on the merger, not the water." Arthur yanked his arm away. The mention of the stock price seemed to snap something inside him. He turned his venom back on Eleanor. "You see this?" Arthur pointed a shaking finger at the tablet on the table, displaying a chaotic spread of red graphs and plummeting numbers. "This is complex. This is the real world. Sterling Dynamics is failing because of a logistical algorithm that supposedly cannot be solved. My best engineers from MIT are stumped. And you? You can't even pour water correctly." Elena looked at the tablet. For a split second, her mask slipped. Her eyes, usually dull with exhaustion, sharpened. She scanned the jagged red line, the supply chain variables listed in the sidebar, and the debt-to-equity ratio. "Your algorithm isn't broken," Elena said softly. Arthur froze. "What did you say?" "I said, your algorithm isn't broken," Elena repeated, louder this time. She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "It's being choked. You're routing your raw lithium through the Singapore hub, but you haven't accounted for the new maritime tariffs enacted last Tuesday. It's creating a 14% lag in production. That's why your stock is tanking. It's not an engineering problem, Mr. Sterling. It's a variable calculus error." The silence that followed was heavier than the crystal vase on the table. Marcus, the CFO, dropped his fork. Arthur blinked. He looked at the waitress, then at his tablet, then back at the waitress. A cruel, incredulous grin spread across his face. He let out a harsh laugh. "A variable calculus error? Did you hear that, Marcus? The waitress thinks she understands supply chain macroeconomics." Arthur reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a gold-plated money clip. He peeled off a crisp $100 bill and flicked it. It fluttered through the air and landed in the spilled water near Elena's shoe. "Here's a tip," Arthur sneered. "Stick to the menu. But tell you what, since you're such a genius—" He leaned in, his breath smelling of aged whiskey and arrogance. The entire restaurant leaned in with him. "If you're so smart, come to my office tomorrow at 8 a.m. Fix the variable calculus error. Save my company from bankruptcy. If you do that, I'll give you $100 million. I'll write it into a contract." He laughed again, looking around the room for approval. "But when you fail, and you will fail, you have to come to my office every day for a month and shine my shoes in front of the board. Deal?" Elena looked at the $100 bill soaking in the water. She thought about the stack of medical bills on her kitchen counter. She thought about her father, hooking up to a dialysis machine that was 3 years obsolete because she couldn't afford the upgrade. She looked Arthur Sterling in the eye. Elena said coldly. "Have the contract ready." Eleanor walked out of the restaurant's back door and into the biting New York wind. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the crushing weight of reality. She leaned against the brick wall of the alley, her hands shaking, not from fear, but from a rage she had suppressed for 3 years. She pulled her phone out. It was an old model with a cracked screen. She dialed a number. "Hey, Dad," she whispered. "Yeah, I'm coming home." "No, don't get up. I'll make the tea." She walked toward the subway, the sounds of the city washing over her. Arthur Sterling had seen a waitress. He had seen a uniform. What he didn't see was Eleanor Vance, the former valedictorian of Wharton, the youngest risk analyst ever hired by Vanguard Systems. 3 years ago, Eleanor was the rising star of Wall Street. They called her the Oracle, because her predictive models never missed. But then, tragedy struck. Her mother died in a car accident, and her father was diagnosed with a rare, degenerative kidney condition the same week. The medical bills were astronomical, far beyond what insurance covered. Then came the scandal. Her boss at Vanguard had embezzled millions and framed her to cover his tracks. She was cleared of criminal charges, but her reputation was destroyed. Blacklisted, broke, and desperate to keep her father alive, she took the only jobs that didn't run background checks. She went from analyzing billion-dollar mergers to wiping tables at Le Méridien. But she never stopped reading the markets. She never stopped calculating. When she arrived at their small, cramped apartment in Queens, the smell of antiseptic hit her. Her father, Thomas, was asleep in the armchair, the hum of the dialysis machine filling the silence. Elena sat at the tiny kitchen table. She opened her laptop, a battered machine she had salvaged from a pawn shop. She typed in Sterling Dynamics. The news was everywhere. Sterling Dynamics stock plummets to all-time low. CEO Arthur Sterling under investigation by SEC. Bankruptcy imminent for tech giant. She pulled up the public financial records. Her eyes darted across the screen. Arthur was right about one thing. The company was bleeding, but he was wrong about the cause. "It's not just the tariffs," she muttered to herself, typing furiously. "The math doesn't add up." She cross-referenced Sterling's shipping manifests with their declared losses. The 14% lag she mentioned at the restaurant was real, but there was something else, something darker. There was a discrepancy in the R&D budget. Nearly $200 million had been moved into a shell company in the Cayman Islands labeled consulting fees just 3 days before the stock crash began. Someone wasn't just managing the company badly. Someone was looting it from the inside. Elena sat back. This wasn't just a math problem. This was corporate sabotage. If she walked into Sterling Dynamics tomorrow and simply fixed the logistics, the saboteur would just break something else. She needed leverage. She spent the entire night coding. She wrote a script to trace the shell company's ownership. It was messy, and she was bypassing firewalls that technically required a warrant to cross, but she didn't care. She was a waitress. Who would suspect her? By 4 a.m. she had a name. The shell company was registered to an LLC owned by a trust, and the beneficiary of that trust? Elena gasped. It wasn't Arthur Sterling. Arthur was an arrogance fool, but he wasn't a thief. He genuinely wanted to save his company. The name on the trust was linked to Marcus Thorne, the CFO, the man who had been sitting at the table telling Arthur to calm down. The man who was supposedly Arthur's best friend. Elena closed the laptop. The sun was beginning to rise over the grimy skyline of Queens. She wasn't just going to fix a supply chain. She was walking into a snake pit. She showered, put on her only suit, a charcoal grey ensemble she hadn't worn in 3 years, and tied her hair back in a severe bun. She looked in the mirror. The waitress was gone. The oracle was back. 100 million, she whispered to her reflection. Dad, I'm going to get you that kidney. The Sterling Dynamics headquarters was a fortress of glass and steel in Midtown Manhattan. At 7:55 a.m., Elena stood before the reception desk. The receptionist, a young woman with a headset who looked like she hadn't slept in a week, looked Elena up and down. Do you have an appointment? I'm here to see Arthur Sterling, Elena said. The receptionist scoffed. Mr. Sterling doesn't see anyone without... Tell him the waitress from Le Méridien is here. Tell him she's here to collect. The receptionist blinked, confused, but she typed something into her chat. A moment later, her eyes went wide. She looked at Elena with a mix of fear and curiosity. He says to send you up. Top floor. Boardroom B. Elena took the elevator up. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her face was stone. As the doors opened on the 40th floor, the noise hit her. Boardroom B was chaotic. Lawyers were shouting over phones. Assistants were running with stacks of paper. In the center of the storm sat Arthur Sterling, looking even worse than he had the night before. His tie was undone, his eyes bloodshot. Standing next to him, looking cool and collected, was Marcus Thorne. When Arthur saw Elena, the room went quiet. He looked at her suit. For a second, he didn't recognize her without the apron. Well, Arthur grunted, standing up. You actually showed up. I half expected you to call in sick. I don't get sick days, Elena said, walking into the room. She placed her battered laptop on the mahogany table. And I don't waste time. Do you have the contract? Arthur laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He gestured to a lawyer in the corner. Give it to her. Standard NDA, plus the terms of our wager. The lawyer slid a thick document across the table. Elena didn't just sign it, she read it. Fast. Clause 4, Section B, she said without looking up. It says the payment is contingent on stock recovery. That's too vague. Change it to implementation of a soluble strategy resulting in a 5% positive trend within 48 hours. The lawyer's jaw dropped. She's right. That is more specific. Arthur narrowed his eyes. Fine. Change it. Sign it. Once the ink was dry, Arthur crossed his arms. Go ahead. The servers are yours. You have access to the main logistics terminal. The login is created for you. You have 6 hours before the market closes. If the stock isn't moving up by the closing bell, you're shining my shoes. Elena sat down. She didn't look at the logistics terminal. Instead, she plugged a flash drive into the main projector system. I don't need 6 hours, Elena said. I need 10 minutes. Marcus Thorne stepped forward, his smile tight. Mr. Sterling, this is a waste of time. She's going to crash the system. Security should escort her out. Scared, Marcus? Elena asked, not looking at him. She was typing rapidly. Excuse me? Marcus bristled. I said, "Are you scared?" Elena hit enter. The massive screen at the front of the room flickered to life. It didn't show the supply chain logistics. It showed a bank transfer web, a complex glowing map of funds moving from sterling dynamics into a shadowy offshore account. "What is this?" Arthur demanded, standing up. "This," Elena said, standing to face the room, "is why your algorithm isn't working. You can't optimize a supply chain when 20% of your operating budget is being siphoned off before it even hits the factories." She pointed to the red node at the center of the web. "Arthur, meet Project Icarus," Eleanor said. "It's a dummy corporation set up to bill sterling dynamics for phantom consulting hours. It's draining $40 million a month, and the IP address authorizing the transfers comes from inside this building." The room was deathly silent. "Whose computer?" Arthur whispered. His voice was trembling. Eleanor looked at Marcus Thorne. Marcus's face had gone the color of ash. He backed away toward the door. "It came from the CFO's office," Eleanor said. Marcus Thorne didn't run. He didn't scream. He simply adjusted his cufflinks, a look of terrifying calm settling over his face. "Arthur," Marcus said, his voice smooth, "you're going to let a waitress with a stolen laptop convince you that I, your CFO, your partner for 15 years, am embezzling funds. She's clearly hacked the system to plant false evidence. It's a corporate espionage tactic. She's probably working for Riker Tech." Arthur hesitated. He looked at the screen, then at Marcus, then at Elena. The room held its breath. The bond between Arthur and Marcus was forged in college dorm rooms and cemented in IPO trenches. It was hard to break. "It's not a hack," Elena said, her voice cutting through Marcus's gaslighting like a scalpel. "It's a mirror." She typed 3 commands. "I didn't break into your system, Marcus. I just asked the server to show me the edit history of the logistics logs. You were lazy. You used your own admin key to authorize the transfers because you didn't trust anyone else to do it. Look." On the giant screen, a log appeared. "User: M. Thorne. Authorization: Level 5. Destination: Icarus Holdings. Amount: $45,000. Date: yesterday." "That's a timestamp from last night," Elena said, "at 8:42 p.m. While we were at dinner at Le Méridien, while Arthur was yelling at me about water, you were under the table on your phone, authorizing a $4 million transfer." Arthur turned to Marcus. His face was pale, drained of blood. "I saw you," Arthur whispered. "I saw you on your phone. You said you were checking the Asian markets." Marcus's mask cracked. His lip curled into a sneer. "So what?" Marcus snapped. "The ship was sinking, Arthur. You were steering us into an iceberg with your obsession over this new battery tech. I was just securing a lifeboat. I earned that money. I fixed your messes for a decade." "By stealing from me?" Arthur roared, his sadness replaced by a volcanic fury. "I was the best man at your wedding. I paid for your daughter's rehab." "And you treated me like a glorified accountant," Marcus shouted back, losing his cool completely. "You get the magazine covers, I get the ulcers. I took what was mine." Marcus lunged for the laptop, intending to smash it, but 2 security guards who had silently entered the room grabbed him. He struggled, kicking over a leather chair. "You're finished, Sterling," Marcus screamed as they dragged him out. "The SEC is already sniffing around. When the news hits that your CFO was cooking the books, the stock won't just drop. It will be delisted. You're dead. And you," he spat at Elena, "you won't get a dime. There's no money left to pay you." The heavy oak doors slammed shut. The silence that followed was deafening. Arthur Sterling collapsed into his chair. He looked 10 years older than he had 10 minutes ago. He put his head in his hands. "He's right," Arthur muttered. "Once this gets out, it's over." The trust is gone. The investors will flee. He looked up at Eleanor. His eyes were dull. The deal is off. I can't pay you. The company won't survive the day. Eleanor stood there, watching the broken billionaire. She could have walked away. She had exposed the crook. She had proven her point. But then she thought of her father's dialysis machine, the rhythmic whoosh-click that kept him alive. She thought of the humiliation of wiping tables for men like Marcus Thorne. She wasn't done. The deal is not off, Elena said firmly. Arthur looked up, confused. Did you hear me? The CFO just confessed to grand larceny. The stock is going to zero. The stock is going to zero if you panic, Elena said. She walked over to the head of the table, taking the seat Arthur usually occupied. But right now, nobody knows except the people in this room. We have... She checked her cheap wristwatch. 5 hours before the market closes. If we can fix the supply chain and announce a breakthrough in production capacity before the news of the arrest leaks, we can control the narrative. We don't sell the scandal. We sell the solution. Arthur stared at her. You really think you can fix a global logistics failure in 5 hours? Elena's eyes flashed. Mr. Sterling, I spent 3 years budgeting a household on minimum wage in New York City. I know how to make miracles out of scraps. Now get me your head of engineering and shut up. Arthur stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, a spark returned to his eyes. He hit the intercom button. Get Dr. Silas to the boardroom, immediately, and get me a coffee. Black. He looked at Elena. And get her whatever she wants. Green tea, Elena said, and the schematics for your lithium transport ships. Dr. Silas, the head of engineering, was a man who looked like he slept in a server room. He had wild grey hair and wore a lab coat stained with coffee. He walked into the boardroom, accompanied by 3 junior engineers, all looking terrified. When he saw Elena, a woman in a cheap suit standing at the head of the table, he scoffed. Arthur, what is this? Silas grumbled. We have a crisis, and you're holding a staff meeting with the catering department? She's in charge, Silas, Arthur said, his voice hard. Listen to her. I am not listening to a waitress. Silas slammed a roll of blueprints on the table. I have a PhD from MIT. We have tried everything. The lithium from Chile is stuck in customs because of the new maritime laws. Unless she can teleport raw materials, we are dead in the water. Elena didn't blink. She walked over to the blueprints. She didn't look at the chemical formulas. She looked at the shipping routes. You're declaring the lithium as raw, hazardous material, Elena said, tracing a line on the map. That's why it's held up. Hazardous material requires a level 4 inspection at the Singapore hub, which takes 3 days. That's your bottleneck. It is hazardous material, Silas shouted. It's unstable lithium. If we don't declare it, we go to prison. I didn't say don't declare it, Elena said calmly. I said change the state of the matter. The room went quiet. What? Silas asked. The new maritime tariff law, Section 8, Paragraph C, Elena recited from memory. She had read it in a discarded Financial Times left on a table 3 weeks ago. It states that component parts intended for immediate assembly are exempt from Level 4 hazmat inspection if they are encased in a stabilizing gel. She looked at Silas. You have a stabilizing gel, don't you? You use it for the final battery casing. Well, yes, Silas stammered. But we apply that in the factory in Nevada. We can't apply it in Chile. We don't have a factory there. You have ships, Elena said. How long is the transit from Chile to Singapore? 12 days? That's 12 days of dead time, Elena said. Retrofit the cargo holds of your transport ships. Turn them into mobile assembly lines. inject the stabilizing gel during transit. By the time the ships hit Singapore, the lithium isn't raw material anymore. It's a stabilized component. It skips the level 4 inspection. You save 3 days on customs, and you arrive in Nevada with the batteries already 40% assembled. Silas's mouth hung open. The junior engineers were exchanging wide-eyed looks. That would actually work, one of the juniors whispered. It would cut the production cycle by 30%. It would cut it by 45%, Elena corrected. And it solves your tariff problem. It turns a logistical nightmare into a manufacturing asset. Silas looked at the waitress. He looked at Arthur. He looked back at the waitress. The arrogance drained out of him, replaced by pure scientific respect. "We need to reroute the SS Orion," Silas muttered, pulling out his phone. "It's currently docked in Valparaiso. If we can get a crew of technicians flown down there in 4 hours—" "Do it," Arthur commanded. "Wait," Elena said. "That's not enough. The market needs to see the numbers move today. Rerouting the ship fixes the future, but we need a win for the present. We need to clear the backlog currently sitting in Singapore." "We can't," Silas said, defeated again. "It's impounded. The inspectors won't touch it until Tuesday." Elena closed her eyes. She thought back to the diner, late nights pouring coffee for all kinds of people. One of her regulars was a man named Big Mike, a retired merchant marine who now worked as a consultant for logistics unions. He loved to talk about the old laws, maritime loopholes that nobody used anymore because everything was digital. "The force majeure clause," Elena said, opening her eyes. "That's for hurricanes," Arthur said. "There's no hurricane in Singapore." "No," Elena said, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "But there is a perishable goods designation. If the cargo is deemed at risk of degradation, the Port Authority is legally required to expedite the inspection to prevent environmental contamination." "Lithium isn't perishable," Silas argued. "It's a rock." "Not if the cooling units on the containers were to—" "Malfunction," Elena said. "If the internal temperature of those containers rises by 5 degrees, the lithium becomes unstable. The Port Authority would have to clear them immediately to get them off their dock." "You want us to sabotage our own cooling units?" Arthur asked, sounding horrified. "I want you to turn them down, just enough to trigger the port safety sensors, but not enough to damage the product," Elena said. "It's a game of chicken. You trigger the alarm. The port master panics and signs the release order to get the dangerous cargo onto your ships and away from his city. Once it's on the water, you crank the cooling back up." The room was silent. It was risky. It was borderline insane. It was brilliant. "If we mistime this," Silas said, sweating, "we blow up a dock in Singapore." "Then don't mistime it," Elena said. "Get on the phone with the ship captain. I'll walk him through the calculations." For the next 3 hours, the boardroom transformed into a war room. Elena was a conductor, and the multi-billion-dollar company was her orchestra. She had the legal team draft the Stabilized Component Manifesto. She had the engineering team calculating the thermal variance for the cooling units. She was on the speakerphone with a terrified ship captain halfway across the world, telling him exactly when to lower the temperature dials. Arthur sat in the corner, watching her. He had seen high-priced consultants, Ivy League prodigies, and industry legends work this room. None of them commanded it like she did. She wasn't just smart. She was hungry. At 3:30 p.m., the call came in from Singapore. "Port Authority just signed the release." The voice on the speaker crackled. "They were terrified the containers were going to cook off. They waived the inspection. The cargo is loaded. We are underway." A cheer went up in the room. The engineers were high-fiving. "Silas," Elena barked. "Update the inventory dashboard, now!" Silas typed furiously. On the main screen, The big red "delayed" banner flashed and turned into a green "in transit." The projected arrival time dropped from 14 days to 3 days. "Arthur," Elena said, turning to him. "Call the CNBC anchor, the one who hates you. Tell him you've revolutionized the supply chain model. Tell him about the mobile assembly protocol. Drop the news now." Arthur grabbed his phone. He made the call. At 3:55 p.m., 5 minutes before the market closed, the news broke. The ticker at the bottom of the screen flashed. Sterling Dynamics announces breakthrough in lithium transport. Projected Q3 earnings up 20%. Elena watched the stock chart. It had been flatlining all day. Suddenly, the line twitched. It spiked up. Then again. Algorithms picked up the news. High-frequency traders jumped in. The line shot vertical. "Come on," Elena whispered. By the time the closing bell rang at 4 p.m., Sterling Dynamics stock was up 7%. The room erupted. Champagne corks, real ones this time, were popped. People were shaking hands. Elena didn't celebrate. She sat down, exhausted. She looked at her hands. They were shaking. Arthur walked over to her. The arrogance was gone. He looked at her with something like awe. "You did it," he said. "You actually did it." "I told you," Elena said softly. "It was a variable calculus error." "You saved the company," Arthur said. "And you saved me." He reached into his jacket pocket, but instead of the money clip, he pulled out his phone. "I'm transferring the funds to escrow now. The contract is valid. $100 million. Elena let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 3 years. She closed her eyes. "Dad, we made it." But just as the atmosphere of victory settled in, the double doors of the boardroom burst open. It wasn't the champagne service. It was a team of federal agents in FBI windbreakers. "Arthur Sterling!" the lead agent shouted. "Step away from the table!" The room froze. "What is this?" Arthur demanded. "We have a warrant for your arrest," the agent said, walking over and cuffing Arthur's hands behind his back. "For conspiracy to commit fraud, embezzlement, and market manipulation." "Me?" Arthur shouted. "It was Marcus Thorne. He did it." "We know about Mr. Thorne," the agent said coldly. "But Mr. Thorne just cut a deal. He claims he was acting under your direct orders, and he gave us the digital signature to prove it." The agent looked at the laptop on the table, Elena's laptop. "And we'll be taking that as evidence," the agent said, pointing to the machine that held the proof of Eleanor's work, and the only leverage she had. Eleanor stood up, panic rising in her throat. "Wait, that's mine! That proves Arthur is innocent!" The agent looked at her. "And who are you?" I'm a consultant," Elena stammered. "Well, consultant," the agent said, bagging the laptop. "If your fingerprints are on this machine, you're coming with us too." The interrogation room at the FBI field office in Lower Manhattan was designed to break people. It was a windowless box of grey concrete, lit by a buzzing fluorescent strip that flickered just enough to induce a migraine. Elena sat handcuffed to a metal table. She had been there for 6 hours. No water, no lawyer. Just the staring eyes of Agent Miller, a man who looked like he chewed gravel for breakfast. "Let's start again," Miller said, leaning in. "You're a waitress at Le Méridien. You barely made rent last month. You have $50,000 in debt. And yet, you suddenly show up at Sterling Dynamics, hijack their mainframe, and manipulate their stock price by 7% in a single afternoon. You expect me to believe you did that alone?" "I didn't hijack anything," Elena said, her voice raspy. "I optimized their logistics, and I exposed a crime. You are the crime. Miller slammed his hand on the table. Marcus Thorne has given us everything. He says you were Arthur Sterling's secret weapon, a black market hacker hired to cook the books and then frame Thorne if the heat got too high. He says you planted that evidence on the screen. Elena laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Marcus Thorne is a mediocre accountant who thinks he's Machiavelli. If I were a black market hacker, do you think I'd be working for Tips on 57th Street? That's exactly what makes it a perfect cover, Miller countered. The Goodwill Hunting Act. It's cute, but it doesn't hold up. We traced the Icarus transfers. The digital signature on the authorization key belongs to Arthur Sterling. Thorne has texts, emails, and voice memos, all deep fakes, I'm assuming, but good ones, where Arthur tells him to set up the shell company. Elena went cold. Marcus had been planning this for months. He hadn't just stolen the money. He had built a trap door and waited for Arthur to stand on it. Arthur is innocent, Elena said. Arthur Sterling is currently in the cell next door crying for his lawyer, Miller said. He's weak. He's going to crack. And when he does, he's going to point the finger at you to save himself. He's a billionaire, Elena. You're a nobody. Who do you think the jury will believe? The pillar of the community or the desperate waitress with the hacked laptop? Miller sat down, his voice softening into a fake, predatory kindness. Here's the deal, Elena. You turn on Arthur. You testify that he hired you to create the fake Icarus trail to frame Marcus. We give you full immunity. You walk out of here tonight. You go back to your tables. You forget this ever happened. Elena looked at the two-way mirror. She knew Arthur was likely behind it, or in a room just like this. She thought about the way he had looked at her in the boardroom, not as a servant, but as a savior. She thought about the $100 million. If she signed the confession, she'd be safe. But Arthur would rot in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And Marcus, the snake, would walk away with the company and the stolen millions. She looked down at the metal table. She closed her eyes and visualized the code she had seen on the screen. The Icarus transfers, the timestamps, the routing numbers. I need my laptop, Elena said. Nice try, Miller scoffed. That's evidence. You can't crack it, Elena said simply. Miller paused. The silence stretched. Excuse me? It's an encrypted Linux partition with a biometric dead switch. Elena lied smoothly. If your tech guys try to brute force it, the drive wipes itself. And if that drive wipes, you lose the only proof that the Icarus signature is a forgery. You lose your case against everyone. Miller stared at her. He tapped his earpiece. He listened for a moment, and his face darkened. Clearly the tech guys were struggling. What do you want? Miller asked. I want 5 minutes with the laptop, in this room, with you watching. I'll unlock the drive and show you the metadata. I'll show you the one thing Marcus Thorne forgot to scrub. Miller hesitated. It was against protocol, but he was desperate. This was the biggest corporate fraud case of the decade, and he needed a smoking gun. 5 minutes, Miller growled. If you try to delete anything, I will tackle you. He signaled the guard. A moment later, the battered laptop was placed on the table. Elena opened it. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She wasn't unlocking a hidden partition. That was a bluff. She was accessing the cache memory of the Sterling Dynamics server she had been connected to earlier. Marcus is smart, Elena said, typing rapidly. He spoofed Arthur's IP address. He forged the digital signature, but he made a mistake. What mistake? Miller asked, leaning over her shoulder. He's greedy, Elena said. Look at the time stamps of the transfers. She pulled up the log. Transfer number 405, $2.4 million, $03 AM, East. Transfer $406. 1.8 million, 0305 AM EST. So, insomniacs move money, Miller said. Arthur Sterling was in Tokyo during those dates, Eleanor said. 03 AM EST is 4:00 PM in Tokyo. Arthur was at a public summit, live streamed. He was on stage. He could have used an auto-scheduler, Miller argued. Not for a Level 5 authorization, Eleanor countered. Level 5 requires a retina scan or a physical biometric key interaction at the moment of transfer. It cannot be automated. That is hard-coded into the bank's security protocol. She hit another key. A new window popped up. It was a schematic of the Sterling Dynamics Executive Suites. This is the building's internal network log, Elena explained. It tracks which physical port the data came from. The signal for these transfers didn't come from the CEO's office. It came from the secure Wi-Fi node in the guest lounge on the 40th floor. Miller frowned. So? Who was staying in the guest lounge during the remodel of his penthouse? Elena asked. She turned the laptop so Miller could see the guest registry log she had just pulled up. There, in black and white, occupant, Marcus Thorne. And here is the kicker, Elena said, her eyes blazing. The biometric key used to authorize the transfer. It matches Arthur's old key, the one he reported lost 6 months ago, the one Marcus Thorne helped him look for. Elena sat back. Marcus has been using a stolen physical key to frame Arthur for 6 months. The IP address says Arthur, but the geolocation of the Wi-Fi signal puts the device in Marcus's bedroom. Miller stared at the screen. The narrative had just flipped. It wasn't a conspiracy between a CEO and a waitress. It was a coup by a CFO. Miller stood up. He walked to the door and opened it. "Get me the DA," Miller barked at the guard, "and get Thorne's lawyer on the phone. Tell him to stop smiling." The silence in the holding cell was heavier than the steel bars that separated Eleanor from the rest of the world. It had been 4 hours since Agent Miller had stormed out with the laptop. 4 hours of staring at the peeling grey paint. 4 hours of wondering if she had just gambled her freedom and lost. Arthur Sterling sat on the metal bench opposite her. The billionaire looked like a ruin of a man. His bespoke suit was wrinkled, his tie lay discarded on the floor, and his head was buried in his hands. "I'm sorry," Arthur whispered. It was the first time he had spoken in an hour. Elena looked up. "For which part? Throwing money at me, or getting me arrested by the FBI?" "All of it," Arthur said, lifting his head. His eyes were red. "I was so obsessed with saving my legacy that I didn't see the snake sleeping in my own guest room. Marcus. He was the brother I never had. And now, because of my blindness, you're going to prison. You should have just taken the tip and walked away, Elena." Elena stood up and walked to the bars. She gripped the cold metal. "I didn't do this for you, Arthur. I did it for the $50,000 in medical debt sitting on my kitchen counter. I did it because my father is dying, and the system decided he wasn't worth saving. I don't regret trying. I only regret that I might not be there when he—" Her voice cracked. She bit her lip, refusing to cry in front of a billionaire. Suddenly, the heavy iron door at the end of the corridor buzzed loudly. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Agent Miller walked in. He wasn't alone. Behind him was the district attorney, a woman with a face like granite, and a nervous-looking man in a suit holding a briefcase. Miller walked up to the cell. He didn't say a word. He just pulled a key from his belt and unlocked the door. Clang. The door swung open. "You're free to go," Miller grunted. Arthur stood up slowly, disbelief written on his face. "What?" "We verified the Wi-Fi logs." The DA stepped forward, her voice crisp. "And we found the physical evidence. A search warrant executed at Mr. Thorne's penthouse 40 minutes ago uncovered the stolen biometric key taped to the back of a canvas painting. We also found a burner phone with drafts of the text messages sent to the Icarus Shell Corporation. The DA looked at Elena. There was a strange look in her eyes. Respect, mixed with a little fear. Your analysis of the timestamp latency was correct, Miss Vance. The transfers were physically impossible for Mr. Sterling to have authorized. The charges against both of you are dropped with prejudice. Elena let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for a lifetime. Her knees went weak, and she had to grab the cell door to steady herself. "And Marcus?" Arthur asked, his voice hardening into ice. "He's being processed upstairs right now," Miller said, a grim smile touching his lips. "He tried to board a private jet to Montenegro. We pulled him off the tarmac 10 minutes ago." Miller handed Eleanor her laptop. It was sealed in an evidence bag, but he ripped it open. "You're a terrifying woman, Miss Vance. If you ever get tired of the restaurant business, the Bureau is hiring." Eleanor took the laptop. "I think I've had enough excitement for one lifetime." The walk through the precinct was a blur, but the lobby was a war zone. Word had leaked. The Waitress CEO narrative was too juicy for the press to ignore. As Eleanor and Arthur pushed through the double doors toward the exit, a commotion erupted near the elevators. 2 officers were dragging a man in handcuffs toward the booking desk. It was Marcus Thorne. He looked nothing like the smooth, arrogant executive from the boardroom. His shirt was torn, he was missing a shoe, and he was screaming legal obscenities at anyone who would listen. When he saw Arthur, he stopped struggling. The 2 men locked eyes. "I did what I had to do," Marcus screamed, his voice cracking. "The company was sinking, Arthur. I was just grabbing a life raft. You would have done the same." Arthur walked over to him. He stood tall, the billionaire returning to his body. He looked down at his former friend with a look of absolute pity. "No, Marcus," Arthur said quietly. "I wouldn't have, because I know the difference between a captain and a rat." Marcus sneered. "You think you've won? You're bankrupt. The stock is garbage. You have no CFO, no credibility, and you're trusting a waitress to run your logistics. You'll be destitute in a month." Arthur smiled. It was a dangerous smile. "Check the ticker, Marcus. We closed up 12%. And as for the waitress, she's not just a waitress. She's the smartest person in the room. Enjoy prison. I hear the shoe-shining service is terrible." The officers dragged Marcus away. As he passed Eleanor, he spat at her feet. "You're nothing," he hissed. "You're just a servant." Elena didn't flinch. She stepped over the spit on the floor, looking him dead in the eye. "I served you dinner last night, Marcus," she said, her voice cutting through the noise of the precinct. "And tonight, I served you justice. Enjoy the meal." The victory was short-lived. As soon as they stepped out into the cool night air of Manhattan, Elena's phone buzzed. It was a number she knew by heart. Queen's General Hospital. Her heart stopped. She answered it, her hands trembling. "Ms. Vance?" The voice on the other end was grim. "It's Dr. Aris. You need to come now. Your father. His kidneys are shutting down. He's gone into septic shock. We're doing everything we can, but without the transplant..." The world tilted. The flashing cameras, the shouting reporters, the victory. It all dissolved into grey noise. "I'm coming," Elena whispered. She dropped the phone. "Elena?" Arthur caught her arm as she stumbled. "What is it?" "My dad," she choked out, tears finally spilling over. "He's dying. I need to go. I need..." She looked at Arthur. "The contract, the bet, the money." "Arthur, the deal," she said, grabbing his lapels. "The contract. Is it valid?" Arthur looked at her, confused by the sudden shift. "Yes, of course. But the funds take 24 hours to clear escrow. I don't have 24 hours, Elena screamed. I don't have 24 minutes. He needs the surgery tonight. If I don't show proof of funds, they won't put him on the list. They'll let him die. Arthur saw the terror in her eyes. He didn't hesitate. Get in the car, he ordered, shoving the paparazzi aside and opening the door to his waiting limousine. Driver, Queen's General, drive like you're running from the devil. Inside the car, Arthur was already on the phone. This is Arthur Sterling. Get me the Chief of Surgery at Queen's General. Now. I don't care if he's asleep. Wake him up. Tell him I'm personally sponsoring a patient. Thomas Vance. Yes, I am wiring a $2 million retainment fee to the hospital's private donor account immediately. Prepare the OR. Elena sat in the corner of the leather seat, rocking back and forth, praying. She watched Arthur scream at bank managers, threaten hospital administrators, and leverage his entire empire to cut through the red tape that was strangling her father. He wasn't doing it for a bet. He wasn't doing it for the company. He was doing it for her. It's done, Arthur said, hanging up the phone as the car screeched to a halt in front of the ER. The surgical team is prepping. The financial hold is lifted. Elena looked at him. Thank you. Go, Arthur said. Save him. 3 days later. The sun streamed through the windows of the private recovery room. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the most beautiful sound Elena had ever heard. Her father, Thomas, was pale but breathing steadily. The new kidney was functioning perfectly. Elena sat in the chair next to the bed, asleep. She hadn't left the room in 72 hours. She was still wearing the same clothes she had worn to the FBI interrogation. A knock on the door woke her. She rubbed her eyes and sat up. Arthur Sterling was standing in the doorway. He held a garment bag and a sleek black briefcase. He's looking better, Arthur said softly. He asked for a cheeseburger this morning. Elena smiled weakly. The doctor yelled at him. Arthur walked in and placed the briefcase on the side table. I brought you a change of clothes. You have a meeting in 2 hours. I do. Elena frowned. I quit my job at the diner over the phone yesterday. I don't have any meetings. You do now, Arthur said. He clicked the briefcase open. Inside, sitting on top of a stack of legal documents, was a check. Paid to the order of Elena Vance. Amount, 100,000 tolls. Ross. Elena stared at the zeros. It was dizzying. It was more money than her family had earned in 10 generations. You actually did it, she whispered. A Sterling always pays his debts, Arthur said. But there's a catch. Elena looked up, wary. There's always a catch. I don't want you to take the money and disappear, Arthur said seriously. The board of directors met this morning. After the news broke about how you saved the Singapore shipment, the stock didn't just stabilize. It hit a 5-year high. The investors aren't asking for me anymore, Elena. They're asking for the logistics genius. He pulled a contract out of the bag. I fired the rest of the executive team. They were all complicit with Marcus, or just incompetent. I need a COO who knows what it's like to work for a living. I need someone who knows the value of $1 and the cost of a mistake. He held out a pen. The 100 million is yours, regardless. But I'm offering you a salary of $2 million a year, plus stock options, to come run Sterling Dynamics with me. Partners. Elena looked at her sleeping father. She looked at the check. Then she looked at the contract. She stood up, walked over to the window, and looked out at the New York skyline. I have one condition, she said. Name it, Arthur said. We have a lunch reservation to make first. Le Méridien was bustling. The lunch rush was in full swing. When Eleanor walked in, wearing the fresh designer suit Arthur had brought her, the atmosphere changed. She didn't look like a waitress anymore. She walked with the stride of a predator. Arthur followed her. The manager, a short, sweating man named Mr. Henderson, rushed over. He didn't recognize Elena immediately. He only saw the expensive clothes and Arthur Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, welcome back," Henderson fawned, bowing low. "We have your usual table. And for the lady?" "The lady," Elena said, removing her sunglasses. "We'll have your keys." Henderson froze. He squinted. Then his face went pale. "Elena," he gasped. What are you doing here? You missed 3 shifts. You're fired. I told you, if you didn't show up." "I'm not here to work, Henderson," Elena said coolly. "I'm here to buy." "Buy? Buy what? A salad?" Henderson sneered, trying to regain his composure. "You can't afford the breadbasket in this place." Elena reached into her purse and pulled out the check. She didn't hand it to him. She just held it up. $100,000,000. Henderson's eyes bulged. He practically stopped breathing. "I just got off the phone with the owner of this building," Elena said. "It turns out he's been looking to sell. I made him an all-cash offer 10 minutes ago. He accepted." She took a step forward. Henderson took a step back. "Which means," Elena continued, her voice echoing through the silent restaurant, "I am your boss, and I have some changes to make." "Ms. Vance," Henderson stammered, sweating profusely. I always knew you had potential. I was tough on you to motivate you. We can work together." "No," Elena said. "We can't." She turned to the kitchen. "Carlos, Maria, Sarah, come out here." The kitchen staff, cooks, dishwashers, and bussers, timidly stepped into the dining room. They looked tired, their aprons dirty. "Henderson docked your pay last week for breakage, didn't he?" Eleanor asked. "Yes, Miss Eleanor," Carlos said quietly. "And he makes you tip out 40% of your earnings to the house?" "Yes, miss." Elena turned back to Henderson. "You're fired. Get out of my restaurant." "You can't do this," Henderson squeaked. "I own the building." Elena smiled. "I can do whatever I want. Security." 2 large men, Arthur's personal security, stepped forward and escorted the sputtering manager out the front door. The diners, realizing what was happening, actually started clapping. Elena turned to the staff. "From now on, this restaurant is a co-op," she announced. "I'm turning the deed over to a trust managed by you, the employees. You keep the profits. You set the hours. And nobody," she looked at Arthur, "throws money at you ever again." The staff cheered. Carlos ran over and hugged her, tears in his eyes. Arthur watched from the side, a look of pure admiration on his face. "You gave away the restaurant?" Arthur asked as they sat down at the center table. "That's not a very capitalist move for my new COO." "I don't need a restaurant," Elena said, pouring herself a glass of water. "San Pellegrino, perfectly sparkling. I have an empire to run." She raised her glass. "To the future." Arthur clinked his glass against hers. "To the waitress who saved it." And that is how Elena Vance went from wiping tables to running a billion-dollar empire. She proved that your current station in life doesn't define your intelligence, your worth, or your future. Arthur Sterling learned the hard way that the best assets aren't always in the boardroom. Sometimes they're pouring your water. And Marcus Thorne? Well, let's just say he's trading stocks for cigarettes in a federal cell right now. What would you do if you were offered $100 million to save the person who insulted you? Would you take the challenge or throw the money back in their face? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice, betrayal, and ultimate redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We upload brand new dramas every single week. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind to everyone you meet. You never know who they really are.